Hello and welcome back to another episode of Not Overthinking. Tamor, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Yeah, it's been a nice weekend. We went to a friend's wedding yesterday. I feel very peaceful. I feel very peaceful this weekend. Did a bit of work this morning. It was quite fun. Now we're recording the pod and we'll have lunch. Yeah, life's good.
Pretty peaceful overall.
Life's good. This is the first time we're doing a side by side on the sofa shot, so that's novel.
Yeah, if you're watching this on the YouTube, then you'll see us side by side.
Nice. How are you?
I'm good. I spent a few days last week in Amsterdam, which was pretty fun. Hung out with an internet friend of mine and her husband. We roamed around and did a little bit of work, did some sightseeing. It was great vibes all around.
Sounds like fun. What's Amsterdam like?
It's kind of like Cambridge, like lots of cobbled streets, but and like looks kind of pretty, but there's like rivers and canals everywhere. Well, just like loads of canals. So basically every 2 seconds there's a bridge that overlooks some kind of canal with boats and stuff on it. It's all very nice.
That's cute.
At least that's like the sort of proper city center. Went to the red light district.
Yeah.
That was kind of interesting.
And what did you get up to?
I saw a peep show.
What's a peep show?
A peep show is where you pay, you go into a booth and you pay a certain amount of money, for example, €2, and then the screen, like the darkened glass becomes undarkened for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And so during that 2 minutes, you peep at what's going on inside.
So some kind of performance.
Some kind of performance, yeah.
That sounds like fun.
It was a bit of it was an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah.
One to take off the bucket list. Not necessarily one I'd recommend, but
Nice.
yeah. So that's me. And other than that, I've been feeling a lot of FOMO about all the crypto stuff, and I've been thinking, you know what, I really need to get on this crypto hype. And so I've been doing a little bit of podcast listening and blog post reading.
Yeah.
About things like, Ethereum and Web3 and the metaverse and NFTs and Axie Infinity and all these things, which, I thought I had a pretty reasonable understanding of crypto. I made a video a few months ago, kind of, Bitcoin for beginners. I spent tens of minutes, tens of hours researching this until I finally figured out what was going on with Bitcoin and turned it into a video explaining the whole hash functions and all that jazz.
Right.
And I thought that was a pretty solid video, and then I thought I understood everything about crypto. So I was like, cool. And now all this terminology is coming up, like freaking DeFi. And apparently it's been going on for the last 12 to 18 months, and I just have been so... I've been seeing grumblings of it on Twitter, but haven't really taken it seriously.
Yeah.
And now that enough of my kind of peers in the creator world, i.e. people who do podcasts and stuff, are jumping on the crypto hype and talking about how we need to be jumping on the crypto hype, I've thought, okay, let me actually do some digging into this.
Nice.
So I've just sort of scratched 5% of the surface of the new crypto stuff, but I thought we'd chat a little bit about our current understanding of crypto. Two random dudes who have done a little bit of reading about it.
Right.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe it'll be interesting for the audience to listen to. I imagine most people who listen to the podcast are not that clued up on crypto. I suspect.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I'm a bit wary that this is like the most cliche thing to do. Like two tech bros with a podcast talking about crypto where they don't actually really know much about it.
It's fine, but as long as we caveat it as we don't really know very much about it. If anyone listening to the podcast is actually an expert on crypto and knows about this stuff, we would love to hear from you, genuinely. Please do email us and correct anything that we said that may be wrong or point us to resources. I'm interested in doing a whole deep dive on this, and I'm working on a big blog post, which I'll turn into a video.
So maybe why don't you start with what's your history with crypto and what's your current level of knowledge?
Yeah, so history with crypto. First heard about Bitcoin way back 2013, probably even before then, and didn't think anything of it. I think you and I at one point thought, we should put like 100 quid into Bitcoin or something. And at the time it was just like too much of a faff to do.
Yeah.
And we didn't really take that seriously, which was a very expensive mistake in hindsight. Really only started actually buying crypto in 2017, just before the bull run, when, for the unfamiliar, in 2017, crypto was started off as about like $3,000.
Yeah, for Bitcoin.
And by the end of that year, Bitcoin was worth about $19,000 at one point, before suddenly crashing down in sort of like late December 2017, early January 2018, completely plummeting down to sort of 10,000, 7,000, that level of price. And so I ended up quote losing around $50,000 in Bitcoin between 2017 through to 2019.
Right.
Because I bought in as the hype was going up and up and up.
Yeah.
It crashed. And
Why did you sell? I really, it baffled me when you sold. Like, why did you sell?
Oh, because I needed to put down a deposit for the flat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I had to take money out of crypto to buy real estate. the ultimate mug move. Yeah. And then I was like, cool, crypto is a bit dead. I didn't really, and then there was 4 years of crypto winter, as they say, from like 2017 through to about 2020, 3-4 years of crypto winter where the price was fairly static, fairly low. Bitcoin was hovering around, I think somewhere between like $5,000 and $10,000 and wasn't really doing anything. Then all of a sudden, a few months ago, was it a few months ago or was it like last year? It feels like it was a few months ago.
I feel like it went up last year, then it went down, and then it's gone up.
Yeah, but now the price of Bitcoin is around about $60,000. So had I held on to the money from 2017, it would have been worth about 3 or 4 times what it was. But I had to realize the losses to buy real estate. But actually, I made an account on cointracker.io recently.
Yeah.
And Cointracker is cool because it's free software that aggregates all of the crypto you've ever bought from things like Coinbase and Binance and on these other kind of, you can connect all your wallets to it. And it shows you your P&L when it comes to crypto over the long term. And so my graph shows that like I put a bunch of money into crypto, subsequently lost a lot of it, and I was about $50,000 in the red. But now that because I've been slowly buying some over the last few months, and because I actually held on to about 27 Ethereums.
Oh, really?
Because I only sold the Bitcoin. Because I was like, I might as well hold on to Ethereum.
Yeah.
Ethereum's gone up by like freaking 500% since then. And so I'm now in the green again.
Nice.
But that's just one very small part of the crypto thing, which is purely treating cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum as a store of value or as a currency that I'm hoping to buy into early on so that the price goes up.
Yeah.
But that's just like scratching the surface of what's going on in the crypto world these days, is my understanding.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's a good history. Yeah, I think mine was kind of similar. I think like 2012, 2013, started hearing about it on like the internet. And I think in like 2012, 2013, when I think a Bitcoin was, I don't know, a couple, maybe like a few dozens of dollars or something for a Bitcoin, maybe like $50 or something, maybe less. I think I tried to buy some, but it was basically impossible to buy it in the UK. There was no online exchange where you could like, do a bank transfer or enter your like credit card info. You couldn't do that. So basically the only way to buy it was to meet someone in real life, basically, who claims to have some crypto, and then like you do this dodgy transaction and exchange money in real life, basically. So I never ended up doing that. So that was right at the end of secondary school. And then I just kind of forgot about it for a bit. And I think similar to you, in sort of 2017, I started sort of slowly buying in, probably from around 3K all the way up to like 19K. I basically used to put like a chunk of my paycheck into it every month. And then I remember in like 2018, that was when CryptoKitties happened. And that seemed quite cool. And so I have a couple of CryptoKitties kicking about. I don't know what's going on with CryptoKitties anymore, but I think the company that makes CryptoKitties is now, so they make other games and stuff, right? Yeah. So yeah, dabbled in some CryptoKitties. I never sold anything. I just kind of held on to it. I didn't really need the money. Just kind of held on. It's doing well these days. I think by default, I just kind of put all my money into crypto. And then when I need liquidity for other things, then I just take out a little bit.
Oh, you do? So you're actually using crypto as like a genuine store of value?
What do people mean by store of value? I've heard everyone say this. What does store of value mean?
As in basically as a bank account.
Huh?
You're using crypto as a bank account, basically. You're putting money into crypto and then just leaving it there. And then when you need to buy stuff, you're converting crypto into fiat and then buying a takeaway.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Okay. What's your percentage gain since you started?
I don't know. I don't really care either. I don't understand why people care about their percentage gain. At first, I think, okay, here's the thing. I think percentage gain doesn't actually matter. I think percentage gain is a vanity metric. Actually, absolute gain is the thing that matters.
No, sure, but like I ask about percentage gain in case you don't want to reveal your crypto holdings.
I don't know my percentage gain. I genuinely don't know.
Have you not gone on Cointracker and just connected your Coinbase account?
There's issues with Cointracker that I won't bother going into because it's really tedious. For that, for which reason my Cointracker numbers are not trustworthy. But yeah, I'm not too fussed to be honest. I don't check the prices. Every time I need to take some money out, that's when I log into Coinbase Pro, obviously. And then I'm like, oh, that's how much my portfolio is. I'll take a few K out, and then I move on. And then the next time I go, despite having taken a few K out, my portfolio is still more than it used to be. It's like, wow, happy days. Just money out of nowhere.
So how much of your paycheck are you putting into crypto?
I mean, basically all of it.
Oh, so you get your salary from your company at the end of the month, and you just buy 50% Bitcoin, 50% Ethereum?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
So the money comes into your account, and you just literally go on Coinbase Pro, you transfer it to Coinbase, and then you're like, all right, cool. I'm not going to bother timing the market, not going to bother like...
Yeah, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Yeah, I don't think most people should be doing this. I think the thing is, I don't have any financial responsibilities, and okay, here's the thing. There's two things that I think let me do this. The first is that I don't have any financial responsibilities. The second is that I have a credit card, and so I can, even with £0 in my bank account, I can spend money on my credit card, and I won't have to pay it until a month later. And so you have this you have this sort of 1 month liquidity buffer where I don't really need to think about it. I can just put the whole paycheck in there. And by the time I need to pay it, maybe my next paycheck will have come in, or maybe I'll just take some money out or something. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, so that's basically what I do. But yeah, I'm just not too fussed about what are my returns, yada yada. From my point of view, I have pretty strong conviction that there's no better place for me to be parking my money. That's all that matters.
Why do you have such strong conviction of this? Most people, when they hear about crypto, their concern is, what if I lose all my money? And you're plowing 100% of your income into it.
The thing, look, again, I think I'm in quite a fortunate position where even if I lose all of it, I don't need it,
Okay.
So I know that I'm taking this sort of risk. Okay, here's the thing. The thing is, it's not going to go to zero. Bitcoin and Ethereum are not going to go to zero. I think I don't know why anyone would think they would go to zero. So it's not a matter of what if I lose all my money, because you're not going to lose all your money. But I'm not encouraging anyone else to do this, by the way. I'm just saying from my point of view, if I don't need to have money sitting around my bank account, I don't have any financial responsibilities. It's a nice asymmetric bet where, yes, I could lose all my money. I don't think that's actually possible. But the potential gain is just quite a lot.
Why will Bitcoin and Ethereum not go to zero?
Sorry?
Why won't Bitcoin and Ethereum go to zero in your estimation? Bearing in mind, this is not financial advice, et cetera, et cetera. This is all purely speculation from two tech bros who vaguely do a bit of reading on blog posts and on twitter.com.
Well, I think if Bitcoin or Ethereum were to go to zero, it would basically mean that no one is doing anything with them anymore at all. And, there's a pretty big critical mass of people doing stuff with it. I mean, if you read enough twitter.com, you'll see that there's a ton of activity in the space, people building cool stuff on top of Ethereum and other blockchains and stuff like that. If you think it's going to go to zero, you're basically saying that this whole crypto thing is going to literally completely fizzle out. And I have pretty strong conviction that, in the future, 10 years from now and longer, there is going to be something happening in crypto still. I think crypto is here to stay. And for that reason, Bitcoin and Ethereum are not going to go to zero.
Okay. What gives you the strong conviction?
It's mostly just having my finger on the pulse of Twitter, really. It's, there's just lots of smart people doing stuff in the space. I don't know, it's unclear I wouldn't try and predict 10 years from now what are going to be the killer use cases of crypto. I don't know, but I think that the concept is sufficiently novel and interesting, and the people involved in doing stuff there are pretty legit. And so I think something is going to happen and something will stick around.
So I think one area in which I certainly struggled, and I'm now kind of just scratching the surface of the possibilities here, is moving away from thinking of crypto as just Bitcoin towards thinking of it as more than just Bitcoin and all the other things that are possible with it. So you saying, I imagine for someone listening to this, if I were to make a few assumptions about our listeners, most of them have probably heard of Bitcoin and Ethereum. They might have heard of other coins like, I don't know, Litecoin or something from back in the day. They maybe understand roughly how Bitcoin works. Potentially seen a couple of YouTube videos about it. Potentially kind of maybe even looked at the white paper, but probably didn't bother reading it properly or trying to understand it because it's quite mathsy. But if our listeners are if my kind of saga through the crypto thing is anything to go by, there was once I understood Bitcoin, I was like, all right, cool, that's fine, I get it. But then you saying stuff like people are building things on top of crypto and there's all this whole space. It's like, how the hell are people building things on top of Bitcoin?
Yeah.
So can you explain, like I'm five, what is crypto beyond just Bitcoin?
Okay, I'll caveat this by saying, look, there are better explanations of this out there. There's a podcast that on the Tim Ferriss podcast a few months ago, he had Vitalik Buterin and Naval who came on to talk about Ethereum and exactly what it means and stuff like that. So I'd recommend, actually, yeah, let me just list out a few resources. So Tim Ferriss podcast from a few months ago with Vitalik and Naval, we'll link to it below.
Yep.
A Quiet FM podcast about Ethereum. I think it's like a 2 or 3 part thing. Quiet FM is sick. Definitely listen to those two. And then Tim Ferriss had a recent one, I think maybe his most recent episode.
Yeah, with Chris Dixon and
Naval, also talking about crypto. So if you want a real explanation about this stuff, I guess if at the end of this episode you think, okay, these tech bros have sparked my interest, then I'd recommend going and listening to these actual podcasts about this stuff.
Yeah, the other one I'd add to the list is Tim Ferriss's episode with Anthony Pompliano. Yeah, apparently people have pointed that as like as like the ultimate resource for understanding kind of the bare basics.
Okay, right.
So we'll link to all the stuff in the video description, in the show notes, wherever you're listening to this. Can you be in charge of doing that, please?
Okay,
wonderful.
Right. So what was the question? Like, okay,
the question
so
was
when I say things like, people are like building on top of crypto, what the hell?
Yeah, like what the hell is crypto beyond this kind of internet gold that we know as Bitcoin?
Okay, cool. So from my understanding, you can't do too much with Bitcoin apart from send Bitcoin to people and receive Bitcoin from other people.
Do you think it's worth doing a quick whistle-stop tour of what Bitcoin is and why it's legit as like a sort of starting point?
Okay, yeah, maybe I'll just see how. So look, just to kind of be explicit about my knowledge in this area, like I said, tried to buy some Bitcoin in 2012, 2013, didn't manage it. In 2017, I actually did some digging, read the white paper about 10 times before I actually understood it, watched the 3 Blue 1 Brown video about it, etc., etc. So I think I had a sort of proper technical understanding of how Bitcoin works in 2017. I think now the technical details are probably missing, but I still have the high level concept.
Okay. The other thing we could potentially do is I have a 17-minute video explaining Bitcoin. We could just embed the audio for that video here.
No, let's not do that. I mean, people can pause this and go watch that if they want. That would be quite tedious, I think, for people who don't care to that degree. So yeah, maybe at a high level. From my understanding, look, I don't know too much about this stuff.
You don't need to. You can stop caveating. We've done all the caveating we need to.
All right, fine. From my understanding, real life money, fiat money, works because we trust the government to maintain the whole system, right? We, the government, gives out Great British pounds to us, and then we spend them, and we kind of trust the government that they're gonna keep giving out Great British pounds as necessary. We kind of, we trust that shopkeepers will keep accepting it and stuff like that.
Yeah. And like back in the day, I think pre-1970, the US dollar was tied to the gold standard, which meant that, if you were to go to the Federal Reserve or whatever and give them $100, they would, like basically every dollar was correlated with an amount of physical gold, which was stored in some vault in Fort Knox or something like that.
Right.
And then President Nixon decided to get the US off of the gold standard, which made it a fiat currency, i.e. purely backed by the power of the government. And so how sometimes people say Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. Like real money has no intrinsic value. It's just bits of paper. But the only reason it has value is because we believe collectively as a society that it does have value.
Yep. The sort of normal currency is kind of built on, is centralized in the sense that it's kind of controlled by a government, right? And so, they could do lots of things. They could just like print a bunch more money, which means that the money that you have is actually worth less than you thought, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're kind of trusting the government not to screw things up. Obviously, And
crucially, it's not just the government we're trusting. It's also we're trusting central institutions like banks and credit card providers like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and so on. Because generally when money exchanges hands these days, it's not a case of I'm giving you $10 or you're giving me £10. It's usually a case of, let's say, in the simple thing of doing a bank transfer. like money is not actually changing hands there particularly. Generally, it's numbers on a screen being updated in one person's account and £10 being added to your number on a screen and £10 being removed from my number from a screen. And the central authority, i.e. the bank, and the financial system regulated by government bodies like the FCA and so on, we trust these financial institutions to do the things properly, such that when I bank transfer you £10, I actually have £10 to give you. I can't like try and transfer the same £10 to multiple people. Like there's all this stuff happening behind the scenes that we take for granted because we implicitly trust these centralized institutions like the government and the banks and the kind of financial regulation system in most countries.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you want to move money, if you want to move normal money, you have to go through these various like intermediaries, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to move money from one country to another, maybe change the currency and stuff, then there's even more like random crap that you have to deal with and random third parties that you have to trust, and it's a bit of a faff. Okay, and so one of the ideas behind Bitcoin is that it is a trustless system. You don't have to trust anyone. Essentially, there's no kind of centralized authority that's giving out the Bitcoins. When you transfer Bitcoin from one person to another, there's no kind of centralized authority that is going into the database, changing some numbers around, et cetera, et cetera. And so Bitcoin is peer to peer in that sense, where if I want to send you £10, I send you £10, right? There's no middlemen.
Yeah. The way to think about Bitcoin is that it's basically a very, very long spreadsheet. And it's a very long spreadsheet that since the start of Bitcoin in 2009 is recording every single transaction that has ever taken place regarding Bitcoin. So if you and I were the second transaction on the spreadsheet, it would say, Ali sends Taimur 2 Bitcoin. And then you've received 2 Bitcoin. Then you could be like, you've sent James 1 Bitcoin because you've got 2 Bitcoins, one and James then has 1. If you tried to do Taimur sends John 8 Bitcoins and you don't have 8 Bitcoins, then the spreadsheet would know that and it would reject the ability, your attempt to spend money that you don't already have. This is kind of like the way the way it made sense for me was, let's say you're going on a group holiday with friends and you're trying to do some kind of system to split the bills and like who's paid for what. Let's say I paid for the Airbnb, you're paying for dinner one night, someone's paying for the drink, someone's paying for the, I don't know, waterfall excursion. We don't really want to bother exchanging actual money because that's a bit of a faff. We want to create a ledger to keep track of who owes whom what money and who spent what money. And that's what companies like Splitwise and stuff do. They basically maintain this ledger. Now, if you wanted to do this in a fairly low tech kind of way, you would just get a piece of paper and you would create your own mini spreadsheet that writes, oh, Ali paid £300 for the Airbnb, therefore Tame owes Ali £75, Jake owes Ali £75, and so on. And with few enough people, this is a system that works because it's based on trusting the ledger, i.e. trusting the spreadsheet, and trusting the person who is managing the spreadsheet. You are trusting implicitly because you're my mate or / my brother that I'm not going to randomly fudge the numbers just because I feel like it. But the idea is that the idea of Bitcoin is, what if you could have this ledger-based system and apply it to the whole world? At this point, you can no longer trust that, I don't know, the Google Sheet that you've got everything in is being managed appropriately. You're having to rely on Google, who's hosting the Google Sheet, or Microsoft, who's hosting the Excel spreadsheet, or the person who's got a physical copy of the ledger in paper format. You're having to trust them that they're not fudging the numbers. And so the whole point of Bitcoin is it basically gives millions of computers all around the world the sort of the power to view this spreadsheet, so that millions of computers all around the world, run by individuals, run by companies, can all verify the authenticity of the ledger. And there is no individual company that has the keys to the kingdom that holds a copy of this mass Google Sheet. I say Google Sheet meaning a spreadsheet, but basically it's and the reason it's called cryptocurrency is that the way this works is probably beyond the scope of this episode, but it's all done through some very clever cryptography and maths that combines to give all of the nodes on the network, i.e. these millions of laptops all around the world, the power to verify transactions and to make sure that no one is misbehaving. And this is why it creates a trustless, decentralized system. Decentralized because, well, there's not a central body controlling it. It's millions of computers all around the world. And trustless is because you don't have to trust an individual party. You don't have to trust the government or Barclays Bank or Google or Facebook to do things properly. The system itself, the code within the Bitcoin protocol, verifies all of the transactions. And it's all open source. Anyone can see exactly how it works. Anyone can see any transaction from 2009 up until now and forevermore. So you don't need to trust individual institutions.
Nice. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure how useful the technical explanation is. Yeah, I think the technical details don't matter too much. I would say actually, like the okay, I think thinking about it as like a shared spreadsheet is good. The reason why it's kind of trustless is that in order to add something to this shared spreadsheet, a bunch of other people who have access to the shared spreadsheet have to verify that transaction. So they have to do some work to make sure that, okay, your wallet has enough money, the other person's wallet exists, et cetera, et cetera. And so anytime you try and add something to the ledger, to the spreadsheet, other people are doing some work to verify that this is okay. They're doing some basic calculations to verify that this transaction actually makes sense. And in that way, like you're kind of trusting, and once they've done that work, it then gets added to the ledger, added to the spreadsheet, and you then tell everyone else who has this spreadsheet, hey, this is a new thing on the spreadsheet. Make sure you have the latest version of the spreadsheet. You send bitcoin.xlsx v to 200 million, whatever. You send that file around to everyone else. And so like what you're doing is you're trusting that at least 50% of the participants of the shared spreadsheet are not trying to screw you over, Like it's kind of like a consensus thing where if a majority of people agree that this transaction is okay, then that transaction is okay. And when Bitcoin was really small, maybe when there's like 10 people, maybe you could get a guy who's a bit of a snake and he convinces 4 other people or something that like, hey, let's sneak in this dodgy transaction so that we get loads of money. When it's like 10 people doing the shared spreadsheet, maybe you can do that. But now that you have kind of millions of people on the shared spreadsheet, if you want to do something dodgy, you will basically have to convince, from my understanding, like 50% of the participants to do this thing with you. And that gets harder and harder the more people there are, because if the spreadsheet is compromised, right? If it's found out that, oh, actually, there's so many fake transactions, there's so many people who've managed to just like magic some money out of thin air, then like everyone will lose trust in the system. And even if you manage to magic yourself some extra Bitcoins, once everyone loses trust in the system, it's not going to be worth anything. And so the bigger the network gets, the more people that are buying into this, the more secure it becomes, because it becomes harder and harder to kind of mess things up.
Cool. So Bitcoin is basically like internet money. A lot of things have gone offline and onto the internet. The way we communicate is, rather than sending letters, we send emails, which is basically sending a letter, but it's like the internet version of sending a letter. And the internet version of sending a letter unlocks a bunch of interesting possibilities that you didn't have when actually sending a letter. It's cheap, it's easy, you can do it anywhere in the world. Similarly, the World Wide Web kind of started off as taking the concept of a brochure and sticking it on the internet in the form of a web page. So now anyone can put their kind of magazine on the internet as a web page. You could write something on a word processing document, on a word processor on your computer. You can stick it on the internet as a web page, and now you can share that web page with anyone in the world. And effectively what you're doing is creating an internet version of this real life thing, i.e. a document. And that's where the kind of files and folders and this other terminology on computers come from, because it mimics real life terminology like files and folders, so people can understand it a little bit better. But because it's now on the internet, you have the power of the internet, you unlock the ability to be able to share it with anyone wherever they are, completely for free, in whichever country they're in, provided they have internet access. One thing that has not really gone online is money. And even though the World Wide Web first started in like 1990, it's still an absolute ball ache and faff to send money to people, to receive money, to manage bank accounts. Our cousin recently moved to the UK to do a master's and had to verify a bunch of things to even try and open a bank account, to send and receive money, especially across borders, is an absolute faff. So like Bitcoin effectively is solving, to my understanding, the issue of essentially trying to create a form of currency which works on the internet and is like internet first, so that you can, if you were to try and design the ideal internet digital currency, it would probably look something like Bitcoin, where it's very cheap, if not free, to send it to anyone. You don't need to trust a central authority. You don't need to bother really verifying your identity. A few caveats with that, because then it opens you to fraud and that kind of stuff. but it's basically kind of magical internet money, which is money going online, which unlocks a bunch of interesting use cases.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so I think that's pretty accurate about Bitcoin. I think it's reasonable to think about it as internet money. But so there's still a question of, okay, like, great, you now have internet money. What does it mean? Like, what are all these people doing? Like, the money's there, bro. Like, what do you have left to do?
Cool. So what the analogy that I heard recently is that Bitcoin is like internet money. So Bitcoin is like gold, but Ethereum, which is this other cryptocurrency, is not really like, the point of Ethereum is not to be money. The point of Ethereum is to be a software platform. So what's your understanding of that?
Yeah, so my understanding of Ethereum, and I didn't make up this term, but it's kind of like this world computer, where you can kind of think of Ethereum as like this massive computer that's shared by everyone in the world who's participating. And so, for example, when you do something on your own computer, right? Your computer has a little processor inside it that, like, crunches some numbers to do whatever you need. Okay, and so your processor on your computer is what lets you do stuff. The processor in Ethereum is kind of all the millions of people that are participating. If you have an Excel spreadsheet, right, on your computer, and you enter in some numbers and you do some calculation, your computer itself is doing that calculation and returning the numbers. On Ethereum, you can create apps, right? You can create apps on this shared computer, and if let's say you created an Excel app on the shared computer, when someone types in, like,
1 + 1
equals 1 + 1.
Yes. Sorry.
When someone types in equals 1 + 1 on the Ethereum Excel, then it's not one computer that's doing that calculation, but a bunch of computers around this in the network are kind of doing that calculation, and then the answer will kind of get returned. And so it kind of lets you sort of pool computer resources, so that you can sort of everyone is kind of doing the processing of any app that's on the Ethereum network. Does that kind of make sense?
And so the Ethereum network is sort of millions of computers that people like me and you have downloaded the Ethereum software onto, and we've decided, okay, well, this computer is now going to join the Ethereum network.
Yeah.
And other people, and that's sort of like the hardware layer, and other people can write their own software using this special coding language that's built for the Ethereum network, which allows people to create their own apps on top of it. And those apps take advantage of basically this massive distributed computer that we use processing power from.
Yeah, essentially. And so, for example, back in 2017, 2018, Lucas and I actually built an app on Ethereum. Ethereum apps are sometimes called dApps, as for decentralized app. We built a dApp. There was basically kind of like an auction where you can send some money to our auction app, and if you send it more than the last highest bidder, then you become the new highest bidder. It returns the money to the previous highest bidder, and your prize for being the highest bidder is that you get to decide where a particular domain name gets redirected. So it was algo.app. And so you could basically send some money to our auction house and say, hey, I want to redirect algo.app to, twitter.com/Tamer Abdaal, whatever it might be. And then if you're the highest bidder, then it actually kind of does that. And so you can write these apps on the Ethereum blockchain, and then anyone in the world can interact with them. The interesting thing is that anyone in the world can see the code for your app. Okay, like when you do a tweet, you can't see what's going on behind the scenes at Twitter HQ. You're just trusting that, okay, when I do a tweet, it'll get posted, it won't get tampered with, yada yada. You're trusting lots of different things for every product you use: Twitter, Facebook, your mobile banking app. You're trusting that these things will work in the way that they claim to work. With apps on Ethereum, when you publish an app on Ethereum, everyone else on Ethereum can read the code for your app. And so, if I create this auction house app and I claim that, hey, we will refund you if you get outbid, that is something you can verify for yourself by reading the code for the app and seeing that, okay, by the way this code is written, I will actually get my money back in the way that these people are claiming I will. And that's kind of a really crucial thing, because again, that kind of means that you don't have to trust any centralized authorities. You kind of have to. I mean, there can still be bad actors, right? Like you can still try and people might not spot a mistake in your code or whatever, but the code is there for anyone to read, and so you can actually kind of verify that these apps are going to do what they say.
And is that what a smart contract is?
Yeah. So an app on Ethereum is called a smart contract, where you can essentially write some code for this contract, and then people can interact with the app by sending messages plus money being ETH to it.
So is the idea behind the Ethereum stuff is that if you want to interact with the network as a user, you have to send some money to a thing?
I think so. Maybe you can send a message without any money. I'm not sure. But yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay. And the reason you send money in the form of, they call it gas, which is basically a fraction of a decimal of some Ethereum, some Ether rather. The reason you send the money is because then the computers on the network that process your transaction, that do the processing of the code, they are incentivized to lend their computing resources to it. And so they get a little bit of a kickback in the form of the transaction fee that you pay for it.
Yeah.
And apparently there's a problem with Ethereum these days where because so many people are building on top of it and it's become so popular in recent memory, the gas fees are ridiculously high. So like earlier today, I was trying to buy some Axie Infinity tokens, and I was trying to transfer like $300 of Ethereum into my account, but it was costing me $120 of gas to transfer $300 of Ethereum. And when the gas fees are that high relative to the amount I was trying to transfer, it just became not worth it. And so this is a problem right now with Ethereum in particular, and the people, the nonprofit foundation that runs Ethereum are trying their best with their team of programmers to solve this problem, is my understanding.
Yeah, I think that's probably my understanding as well. Again, I think the technical details are kind of confusing, but essentially, Ethereum is like this big computer that everyone in the world is sharing, and you can write apps for this big computer. Interestingly, all these apps can interact with one another, and so you can have an app that does a certain thing, someone else can have an app that does another certain thing, and then you can have an app that like connects the two things together. And so you can kind of it has this sort of composability aspect where everything is like a Lego building block that plugs into each other. Whereas, for example, if I'm on a Mac and my friend is on a PC or something, our desktop apps can't really like interact.
Yeah, I don't really get the technical details of this composability thing. That's a thing that I was going to do a deep dive on at some point. Do you understand how it works?
I mean, I think so. I think there's just like one core concept, which is this smart contract, and everything is a smart contract. And the thing that you do is you send messages to smart contracts.
Okay.
And then a smart contract can take a message and programmatically turn it into another message, which it sends to another contract and stuff like that. And so all of these contracts can speak to each other if they wanted.
Okay. So it's like, let's say I create a smart contract that takes a number, multiplies it by 5, and gives it back. And then you could make a smart contract. You could say, hey, I want to take a number, multiply it by 10, and then I want to send it to Ali's smart contract, which multiplies it by 5. Yeah. And then his smart contract will send it back. And then I'll do something with that number in my smart contract and like maybe send it back to the user.
Yeah, sure.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
But obviously that's a very, very simple example. In more interesting use cases, well, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but it's like...
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of DeFi, which means decentralized finance. There's a lot of interesting financial applications being built on Ethereum where, I don't know too much about them, but in the same way that there's kind of weird financial instruments in real life that have certain risks and reward structures and stuff like that, you can kind of instead of having some investment bank where some analyst is sitting there and telling you that, hey, I can give you this instrument for this price right now, whatever. It's all just kind of completely programmed. And so you can make kind of weird financial instruments that do weird things if you wanted. And there's a lot of that going on.
What's the deal with NFTs?
I don't really understand, to be honest.
Okay. I think I do.
Okay.
So why don't you ask me some questions and I'll see if I really understand.
Okay, so I know that NFT stands for non-fungible token. It basically means that like it's not a currency in the sense that you can't like divide it. If I have one Bitcoin, I could split it in half. I could send half of it to someone else, etc. And NFT is like a unique thing that can't be that's not divisible by anything, right?
Yeah. So the way I understood it was that basically what understanding what the word fungible means, and fungible is this thing you've just described of being able to split apart, such that the sum of the splitting equals the whole. Like you said, let's say you had $10, you could split that up into $1 bills, and those $1 bills added up would equal the $10.
Yeah.
But also, like, your $10 is exactly the same as someone else's $10.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that it's your $10 bill does not make it any more or less valuable than the fact that it's someone else's $10 bill. So that's what a fungible token is. Token just being item. So $10 and the dollar is a fungible token. You know, Bitcoin is a fungible token because it can be split apart, and one Bitcoin is worth exactly the same as any other Bitcoin. What is a non-fungible token? A non-fungible token is something that does not have these properties, i.e. that cannot be split up, and also that kind of the original copy of the thing may be worth more than subsequent copies of the thing. For example, the Mona Lisa is a non-fungible token. The Mona Lisa is an NFT because there is only one of it. It's worth quite a lot of money. You can't split up the Mona Lisa into parts and sell those parts and then put them together and it's suddenly the Mona Lisa again. And also, the original Mona Lisa, which is in the Louvre Museum in Paris, is worth a hell of a lot more than my photocopy replica of the Mona Lisa, which I've got up in my bedroom wall. So the Mona Lisa, these works of art, these are all non-fungible tokens. You know, a shiny Charizard first edition from Pokemon back in the day is a non-fungible token because you can't split it up, and you know, each individual copy of that Charizard is worth something. And depending on the condition, depending on who the original collector was, depending on how original it is, depending on whether it's a first edition, is probably worth more than if you try to photocopy that Charizard and try to sell that piece of paper to someone. So that's basically what an NFT is. It is a thing, an item that has that is sufficiently scarce and is unable to be kind of fungified, cannot be split.
Yeah, that makes sense. But like, what's the point?
The point of NFTs is that it's a recognition that things can have value even if they don't have value. I.e., it's a recognition of ownership, that owning something. Okay, let's think about it in the context of the Mona Lisa. Why does the Mona Lisa have value?
I know, because a bunch of people say it does.
Exactly. The Mona Lisa has value because a bunch of people say it does. And you, as the owner of the Mona Lisa, or the Louvre Museum as the owner of the Mona Lisa, knows that they have the original copy of the Mona Lisa because they can verify its authenticity, because a bunch of art historians and stuff from all around the world have looked at it and said, oh my God, this is the actual legit Mona Lisa. And because a bunch of art collectors all around the world would like value the Mona Lisa at, you know, tens of millions of dollars, it therefore has value. Even though at the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper with a bunch of paint splodges on it. So the Mona Lisa has no intrinsic value, but it does have value because society believes it has value. Now the question then becomes that, is it only physical items that can be like this? What if the Mona Lisa, instead of being a physical painting, what if it was just a JPEG, an image on the internet that someone created on Photoshop, that, you know, Leonardo da Vinci created on Photoshop and put it online? Does that copy of the Mona Lisa still have any intrinsic value? What do you reckon?
Yeah, sure, if people think it does.
If people think it does, yeah, quite. And so you can imagine a future in which taking a step back, a criticism people have of NFTs when they first hear about it is, can't you just like right click the JPEG and save it to your computer? Now I have a copy of the Mona Lisa, just like you have a copy of the Mona Lisa, just like LeonardoDaVinci.com has a copy of the Mona Lisa. It's all the same JPEG, and so why does it matter? That's a problem with it being on the internet, which is that it's very easy to copy. Now, where the blockchain comes into this, from my understanding, again, being a non-expert, doing some caveating, where the blockchain comes into this is that, what if you could actually certify that a digital copy of the Mona Lisa is in fact the original that Leonardo da Vinci painted on Photoshop? And what if anyone in the world could see the little verified check mark next to my JPEG of the Mona Lisa, and would therefore know that, oh my God, Ali Abdaal is the one who owns Leonardo da Vinci's original Photoshop copy of the Mona Lisa. Incredible. And if you were to try and screenshot my copy, then it would be it would be clear as day for anyone to see that you've just screenshotted my copy. You don't actually own the original. So that's what why NFTs are powerful, because they're a way of introducing the concept of property ownership and authenticity to digital goods. So imagine, Ed Sheeran's just come out with his latest album, Equals, absolute banger. Some fantastic songs on there. What it like, I don't know if he's done this. I suspect probably not, because I haven't heard about it. Ed Sheeran could release his album as an NFT, and someone around the world could buy the original digital copy of his album. Does this have any intrinsic value? Well, not really, because on one hand, anyone can listen to the album on Spotify, anyone can stream the MP3, anyone can just like pirate it, and they have the MP3. But because we are ultimately status-seeking beings, there will be someone in the world who will feel good about the fact that they own the official copy of Ed Sheeran's album. Just like if Ed Sheeran released like one vinyl copy of the album, then the person who owned the first edition would that would be worth more than subsequent copies of it. Just like first editions of Harry Potter books are worth more than reprints. Just like first editions of Pokemon cards are worth more than reprints. Essentially, NFTs let you create a digital version of a first edition. And so if I'm a big Ed Sheeran fan, I can be like, oh my God, I would happily pay $1,000 to own the first edition of his album as a digital asset, which in the future other people can, and then other Ed Sheeran fans will give me status for owning that symbol. Ed Sheeran's a freaking huge deal. If he released his album as an NFT, someone else, some other fan from, I don't know, Libya might be like, oh my God, I'm going to pay $10,000 to own that. Some other fan from the US might be, you know what, I'm going to bid $100,000 for that. And you can imagine Ed Sheeran's original first edition album ultimately is just an MP3 file of like a bunch of songs. But you can imagine that it has sufficient social value by virtue of the fact that it's Ed Sheeran's first edition album, such that someone around the world would probably pay like $20 million to be able to own that NFT. And then what they're hoping is that it gives them a badge of status that, hey, check me out, I am the owner of the original Ed Sheeran. But it also means further down the line, as Ed Sheeran becomes bigger and more famous potentially, that original first edition digital asset becomes worth more money because now Ed Sheeran is more famous.
Right.
And so imagine if you had the very first copy of J.K. Rowling's for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. That would be worth a large amount of money right now because she got so big. And that's interesting because let's say you were the first 100 people to read Harry Potter and you thought, oh my God, I think there's something here. I want to buy a first edition and I want to keep it in mint condition and I want to hold on to it. And I want to have a certificate of authenticity on it from Bloomsbury or from Scholastic or from J.K. Rowling herself, a signed thingy saying that this is the actual first edition. And then you hold on to it for 20 years and now you sell it for like 10 million quid because it's suddenly more popular.
Okay. So it seems like NFTs are essentially, it doesn't solve the problem that like people need to decide that something is meaningful. People still need to just, in the same way that like if I paint a painting and try and get it up in the Tate Modern or something, people will need to decide that this thing is meaningful.
Yeah.
And if I make a cool picture on the internet and try and sell it for money, people will need to decide that the thing is meaningful. An easy way of that is by someone who's famous in real life to do something, and then it's automatically meaningful. Like if Banksy decides to produce digital art, it's going to automatically be meaningful because he's Banksy, or she, or maybe it's a he. I think it's been revealed or something. If J.K. Rowling produces some digital Harry Potter thing of which she's only ever going to do like three versions of in the world, then it's automatically meaningful because it's J.K. Rowling. And it seems like having it seems like where the blockchain aspect of this comes in is that it's just like a formal way of saying, hey, you own this specific thing. Whereas if J.K. Rowling were to produce a cool Harry Potter image, she's like, hey, I'm only making one of these Harry Potter images, and I'm going to send it to you in an email attachment if you pay me $1 million, then that image could very quickly turn into multiple images, and you won't know who had the original one. And so it seems like the blockchain is basically sort of formalizing the ownership of digital assets. And so digital assets that people consider meaningful, you can now see who owns them. And because it's they're all on the same blockchain, so all of these NFTs are on the Ethereum blockchain. And so you can kind of trade them, you can send them to each other and stuff like that. And everyone knows, okay, this person owned it first, then this person owned it. And so you know that, okay, there's still just one of these things, it's just been passed around. And yeah, you can kind of monetize meaning digitally, I guess.
Yeah. And the fact that it's on the blockchain is interesting because we've sort of established, like if you believe in Ethereum, if you trust the kind of cryptography behind it, and trust that kind of these millions of computers all around the world are maintaining the network, it means that your certificate of authenticity, effectively for your NFT, is verified by millions of computers all around the world. It's not that you're relying on, I don't know, Christie's or the Louvre or the Tate Modern to have a curator and a bunch of art historians that are producing a certificate for you. You've literally got a sort of a computer-based program that anyone can verify the authenticity of, which is being verified by millions of computers all around the world, to say that, oh, actually, it is in fact Ali Abdaal that owns the original first edition of Ed Sheeran's new album. Now, why could this be interesting? I think it's interesting just on the surface because it's moving the concept of ownership to real life, just like how Bitcoin moved the concept of money to real life. Just how Bitcoin moved the concept of real life money onto the internet. The idea of NFTs is now moving the concept of ownership of goods onto the internet, which means, you know, you can imagine in the future if like a really fancy government like the Estonian government decides to do away with their land registry and decides to kind of do away with the archaic old systems that track who owns what property in real life, and that were to go on the internet onto a blockchain. Now, kind of, if I wanted to buy a house, it's a lot less faff because it's all based on like internet stuff. It's all in the cloud. It's all digital, rather than it being a case of like updating physical documents like it often is in the UK with lawyers and all that kind of stuff. It's also interesting because like it's not just a case of me wanting to own Ed Sheeran's album as a status symbol. You can then start unlocking interesting use cases. Like, let's say I want to release 100 tickets of the Part-Time YouTuber Academy. And if you own a ticket to the Part-Time YouTuber Academy, if you have one of these golden tickets, you're allowed to come to our in-person events. Or you're allowed to come to our monthly Zoom calls. But only if you own one of these 100 tickets can you come to our monthly Zoom calls. Now, if you own one of these tickets, someone else can't just copy and paste that because there's a way of verifying the authenticity of it. Whereas if you gave them a password, if you gave them a QR code, you know, they could just screenshot that and someone else can enter my event, which I'm trying to gate. But now my golden tickets that I've given to you become worth something, because 10 years from now, when Ali Abdaal becomes more famous, these events become more like, I don't know, more exclusive. Now you can sell your golden ticket once you've decided you're not Ali Abdaal fan anymore. You could sell it to someone for maybe 10 times as much, because that the fact that they can verify who owns the ticket means that person will then get the access rights into the community, into the space, into the events, into whatever. What some people are doing is that if you own an NFT, then you're allowed to join a special Discord community, and only if you own the NFT are you allowed to join the Discord. But then by virtue of being in that Discord, you have early access to subsequent NFTs that the artist like Banksy or someone might drop. So I think we're still just kind of barely scratching the surface of what's possible. But certainly as I've been listening to a bunch of these podcasts and reading a bunch of blog posts and tweet threads about this stuff, I feel like, damn, this is actually kind of interesting. And a few weeks ago, I thought, oh, it's just like a JPEG. Why are people paying millions of dollars for a JPEG? But if you apply the concept that, well, stuff is valuable because we as society believe it's valuable, and B, you apply the concept of being able to verify the digital ownership of something to an individual, then you unlock a lot of interesting use cases further down the line.
Here's the thing, though. Here's what I think a lot of people are feeling. I think you mentioned that you're kind of feeling a bit of FOMO about the whole crypto thing. I think a bunch of people are feeling a lot of FOMO because it seems like lots of people are getting rich, genuinely getting rich overnight because of like NFTs. You know, you create some hype for this thing, you create this NFT, and you kind of tell people, oh man, this thing is going to be worth loads. You should get it now, and then the price is going to go up, etc. And it seems like there's a lot of that. There's a lot of grifting going on in the NFT space, and I think that kind of gives it a bit of a bad reputation. Because yeah, I mean, people are getting extremely rich essentially overnight because of these things. And lots of people are trying to do that now. And so there's a lot of that. And so I think a lot of people are kind of feeling a bit of FOMO of like, oh shit, like should I be getting into this? And so I think there's a lot of that going on, which kind of makes some people look down on NFTs. I think NFTs originated a while ago. Like CryptoKitties were, I think, the first sort of real NFT. And that was in 2017, 2018. And they recently made a big resurgence. Yeah, I think there's a Dunning-Kruger kind of effect of Twitter where if you read Twitter for, say, 1 hour a day, then you probably think NFTs are a scam, a Ponzi scheme, a get rich quick scheme. But if you read Twitter for 3 hours a day, you understand that there's that element of it going on. But you also appreciate that, okay, after all this kind of Ponzi scheme style hype and, people getting rich and stuff like that, there will probably emerge some genuine, interesting thing here. Okay. And so, I consider myself in the latter category, obviously. And yeah, so I haven't really been following the oh man, everyone's doing NFTs. I remember we chatted about it a few months ago. I think I made some meme or something. And back then people were thinking, oh man, you can digitize memes as NFTs and stuff like this, or tweets and YouTube videos. I think that was kind of the first wave of NFT craze all those months ago. Yeah, I never really got into it. I think my view was always yeah, it looks like something's going on there. Realistically, do I want to spend the time? Do I want to spend the time to look into this thing and understand this thing? Maybe, probably not. I have other things I'm doing these days. And then it's but you can make some money. And then ultimately, my view is kind of look, there's always going to be people getting rich. I don't really care. I'm going to keep buying Bitcoin and Ethereum because I think that's still going to go up even with all this other stuff going on. And yeah, just kind of taking a more of a long-term view of I'm sure I'm missing out on lots of money by not bothering to look into this NFT stuff, not bothering to look into every new blockchain that starts, every new coin. I'm sure I'm missing out on lots of potential money. Ultimately, I don't really care. I'm just going to hold some Bitcoin and Ethereum and keep doubling down there, and the price will go up. And I think it's a good sort of a good investment and a good bet on the space. That's kind of my view.
Yeah, I think very reasonable. That's kind of my view as well. The only thing that differs from mine to yours is, given that I do stuff on YouTube and I want to I want to document the things that I'm learning about. I want to try and capture my newbiness status as not knowing anything about the space. As I become more versed in it, just because it's interesting, I want to be able to turn that into YouTube videos to help, document that process for other people to learn about the thing. And there's an element of FOMO in that as well, because there's a bunch of YouTube channels blowing up because there's so much demand for people understanding crypto, NFTs, Web3, metaverse type stuff. That I feel like, given that I ultimately want to be a teacher on the internet, if I can kind of synthesize all this stuff and turn it into a bunch of videos that are explaining it from first principles, once I understand it better, then there is potentially some value to be captured there for my kind of media business thing.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
that's probably what got me into it.
Nice. So I think if someone's listening to this episode, to be honest, I think our technical explanations are really crap. I think that was probably we probably spent a bit too much time trying to explain the concepts behind things. I'd recommend listening. We'll link to some of those other podcasts about this stuff if you're interested. But yeah, in short, my position is crypto is here to stay. Unclear exactly what people will be using it for 10 years from now, but I'm sure it'll be something. And so I think it's worth having some awareness about it. And if you are thinking about where you want to park your money, where you want to invest your savings, et cetera, I think it is a no-brainer to put some of them into crypto.
Yeah, broadly my position as well. I think that brings us to the end of the podcast.
Yep. Maybe we can do an insight of the week.
Oh, yeah.
I'll open up twitter.com. I deleted the Twitter and Instagram apps last week, so now I'm on the Twitter mobile website.
On twitter.com.
Yeah, Jay on twitter.com. Yeah, something that I was thinking about last week is that I don't know if you've ever had to make a friend across a language barrier. If you're in a foreign country or something and you don't speak the language very well. I think there's a real beauty to it. Actually, I'll open up my tweet again to see the points that I made about it. Yeah, I think when it takes work just to have basic communication with someone else, you don't end up when you meet someone normally, as you get to know them a bit, over a 1 hour conversation. If you're both, for example, native English speakers, you can figure out so much about them and you can make so many inferences about them based on how they talk, what they're talking about, subtle body language things. There's so much there that within a short period of time, you can make a bunch of inferences about someone. And some of you might find certain things distasteful about them, but I think there's a beauty to having a really serious language barrier. Or maybe I'll just read out my tweet. Okay, here it is. It's a thread. All right. So when basic communication takes work, you don't get to the things that you might find distasteful about the other. And if you do, your worlds are so different that you couldn't pass judgment. And if you could, you think, what would be the point? And so a new country, someone completely different background, completely different world. Like even if you find that, they have a different take on something, you will almost certainly just conclude that, different world, whatever. I go on to say, you're deaf to their subtleties of speech, the telling twang to their accent, the revealing choices of words. Why did they say this and not that? Are they trying to signal something? I go on to say that the only signal is that they are trying, and you are too. You're trying more than you try in most conversations, in fact. Trying to listen, trying to understand, trying to respond, sincerely trying to connect. Sentences are hard. You're doing lots of hand motions. Your face is also, you're doing a lot of facial expressions to try and communicate. And after all of that effort, you get your reward, which is that you find out that they live nearby and that the orange juice is good here. And you tell them that, oh, my partner's over there and I'll try the orange juice. So nice. Like all this work to have like a really basic conversation, but it's really nice and it feels really meaningful because it doesn't have like all the other crap that goes through our heads when we're interacting in like a native language with someone else who speaks that native language.
I don't think I've felt that feeling of meaningful when communicating with people for whom communication is difficult because of a language barrier.
Really?
Yeah.
It's so rewarding even getting to that basic point of like having like a really, trivial conversation. Here's the thing. I think the reason it's cool is because the information that you transfer is very little. It's very trivial, but like
the vibes,
yeah, the vibes are the same.
Generally, both parties have a smile on their face, but there's a bit of laughter,
Yeah, like
language.
The vibes are sort of unadulterated. The information is like whatever. Who cares about the transfer of information? The information is really just a fodder for transferring vibes. And I think the vibes are just really good because you're both like making such a huge effort to communicate and you don't get a chance to have all the other psychic chatter in your head about like the other person, about yourself, about the situation, etc.
Is this sort of like, I certainly don't feel this when I'm speaking to someone who has a bad internet connection.
No, that's not it. That's not it. I think real life, it has to be kind of real life.
It has to be in real life. Yeah. Okay, fine. Yeah, interesting take.
Yeah, think about it. All right. Thanks everyone for listening and we'll see you next week.
See you later.